Hello again everybody, and more today from Homer's Iliad. Previously I talked about the introduction to the Iliad and also some very moving and intimate moments from Iliad book 6 as Hector dons his armour and helmet and goes out to fight, and his son doesn't recognise him as his dad. But then later on, well, things have moved on a bit by Iliad book 16, which is what I'm going to talk about today. So the fighting had ebbed and flowed. At one point the Trojans had been on top, another point the Greeks had been on top, and both sides had reached the point of triumph and despair. But all the time the gods had been there in the background, and sometimes they'd been there in the foreground, and that's my little sort of sub-theme today. It's about the world of gods and men intertwining. Aphrodite has intervened at one point to rescue her favourite Paris, the Trojan prince. Athene always offers guidance to Odysseus and to the Greeks. But sometimes gods intervene even more directly than that, and it makes us wonder, with our modern minds, our modern outlook on things, whether this is fair. And certainly to a British point of view, it's, well, is this quite cricket? Now in the scene I'm going to look at, this is to do with the death of Patroclus. Now Patroclus was the friend, perhaps the lover of Achilles, the greatest Greek fighter, and he had had a huge row with Agamemnon, and he had withdrawn from the fighting to a pretty catastrophic effect for the Greeks, and this was the consequence of the anger that I spoke about yesterday in Iliad book 1. Anyway, Patroclus, on seeing the desperate situation the Greeks were in, had begged Achilles to allow him, even if Achilles wasn't going to join the fighting, to allow him, Patroclus, to join the fighting, and he does so, but dressed in Achilles' armour. Now initially, Patroclus is pretty successful because he's a good fighter, and the Trojans are terrified of him because they see the armour of Achilles and they think it's Achilles, and because Achilles is the greatest fighter, the Trojans are therefore terrified. So this is where Apollo takes a hand. So this is from Iliad book 16. And now the sons of the Achaeans would have taken high-gated Troy at the hands of Patroclus as he was raging with his spear beyond all measure, if Phoebus Apollo had not taken his stand on the well-built battlement, with his mind on death for Patroclus and defence of the Trojans. 3 times Patroclus went to climb the angle of the high wall, and 3 times Apollo knocked him back, pushing at his bright shield with his immortal hands. But when for the 4th time Patroclus flung himself on like a god, then with a fearful shout Apollo called to him in winged words, "Back, Lord Patroclus, it's not fate for the proud Trojan city to be sacked by your spear, nor even by Achilles, a far greater man than you." So he spoke, and Patroclus gave back a long way, avoiding the anger of Apollo the far shooter. But Hector held in his strong-footed horses at the Scaean gates. He was uncertain whether to drive back into the rout and fight on, or to shout to his people to gather inside the wall. As he was thinking on this, Phoebus Apollo came up to him, taking the form of a man of strength and power, Asios, who was uncle to Hector, the tamer of horses, being full brother of Hecate and son of Dymas. He had his home in Phrygia by the stream of Sangarios. Taking his form then, Apollo, the son of Zeus, spoke to Hector. "Hector, why have you stopped fighting? It's wrong of you. If only I were as much your superior as I am now below you, then you would soon learn the cost of shirking battle. No, come, hold your strong-footed horses against Patroclus. It may be that you can kill him, and Apollo will grant you your triumph." Well, Apollo there has driven back Patroclus directly, and he's taken the form of somebody else, which gods often do in Homer, and he's provoked Hector into a particular course of action. So the fighting goes on a little bit, and then Patroclus meets his match. Now, as you will see, this raises big questions for us as a modern audience. Does it make us think, how unfair? How much less heroic for Hector, the Trojan hero, the Trojan prince, that he needs divine assistance? Or does it enhance Patroclus's heroism that he could only be overcome by a god? So this is what happens a few lines on towards the end of book 16. And Patroclus charged at the Trojans with murder in his heart. 3 times then he charged like the swift war god himself, shouting fearfully, and 3 times he killed 9 men. But when for the 4th time he flung himself on like a god, then, Patroclus, the ending of your life was revealed. Phoebus met you in the battle's fury, terrible god. Patroclus did not see him moving through the rout. Apollo came against him, hidden in thick mist, and stood behind him, and struck his back and broad shoulders with the flat of his hand, so that his eyes spun round. Then Phoebus Apollo knocked the helmet from his head, and the great masking helmet rolled clattering under the horse's feet, and the hair of its crest was sullied with blood and dust. Before now it was not permitted for this horse-crested helmet to be sullied in the dust, but it guarded the head and fine brow of a godlike man, Achilles. And now Zeus allowed Hector to wear it on his head, as death was close upon him. And all the length of his long-shadowed spear, huge, heavy, massive, tipped with bronze, was shattered in his hands, and from his shoulders his fringed shield dropped with its strap to the ground. And Lord Apollo, son of Zeus, broke the corslet off him. Bewilderment took his mind, and the strength collapsed from his bright body, and he stood there dazed. Then from behind a Dardanian man came close and struck him with his sharp spear in the back between the shoulders. Well, everything that happens to poor old Patroclus there happens from behind, so it's not a great end for him. So Hector then joins in and deals him what proves to be his mortal blow. And then, in the manner of heroic warriors, he stands over the body and boasts and tells him who it is that struck this final fatal blow. And Patroclus, again in the manner of the most heroic Homeric heroes, Patroclus gets to reply. It's a bit like a Shakespearean soliloquy where somebody dies and then raises himself up on one elbow and delivers a speech. So this is the end of Patroclus. Then, with the strength low in you, horseman Patroclus, you said to him, says Homer, yes, make your great boasts now, Hector. You were given the victory by Zeus, the son of Cronos, and Apollo. It was they who overpowered me with ease. They took the armour from my shoulders. But if 20 such men as you had come against me, they would all have died where they stood, brought down under my spear. No, it is cruel fate and Leto's son that have killed me, and of men, you Phobos, you are the 3rd in my killing. I tell you another thing, and you mark it well in your mind. You yourself, you too will not live long. But already now death and strong fate are standing close beside you to bring you down at the hands of Achilles, great son of Aeacus' stock. As he spoke, the end of death enfolded him, and his spirit flitted from his body and went on the way to Hades, weeping for its fate and the youth and the manhood it must leave. Well, the death of Patroclus certainly has consequences, as we shall see in the next video. But I wonder what you think about this whole business. Does it make it more or less heroic for Patroclus to need to be killed by a god?